Hello again, freaks, and if it's your first time here, welcome. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you like art because that's what we've got going on over here. I broke out the pastels, specifically soft pastels from Artist Loft, not sponsored, which I haven't used since elementary school, I think, like pastels in general, not just these. And if I had at some point between then and now, then I just don't remember, so it's like using them for the first time. And for this set, it may well be because these were gifted to me a long time ago, and like many gifted art supplies, I just had never gotten around to using them. So settle in, grab a drink, grab a snack, get out your sketchbook or homework or whatever, and let's get started. I think fish have been on my mind because I've been obsessed with playing this Steam game, Tiny Aquarium, and it's like this, it's an idle game. And you can fish, you collect them, you can buy them, you can get decorations for your tanks, and there's like different rarities of them, and you can get like shiny fish if you're lucky, like a shiny Pokemon basically, and it's been so fun. So I guess that's why I doodled this little guy. He's just a generic fish. I wasn't going for anything specific, like a specific breed or anything, but I was playing around with these pinks and blues because I like the way they contrast each other, and I was just getting like familiar with how the pastels feel because, like I said, it's been a long time since I've worked with them, and I really liked the like almost electric blue here to outline the fish, and just look how cute. So I finished up that fish, which produced a surprising amount of chalk dust, and now I'm moving on to attempting to draw a crow from memory. I am kind of referencing that little crow figurine on the side. It's from Game of Thrones, actually, but you know, of course, the figurine can only be so accurate as well, and I was only roughly looking at it, and its head and neck kind of definitely look a little funky. But I was just, you know, having fun trying to recreate or like tap into that childhood joy of just drawing with crayons and pastels. And she's a little skinny here. I do think I beef her up a little later, but so far I'm quite enjoying the pastels. They are nice and soft. I did use these wax pastels a little while ago, which I didn't like as much. I think I would enjoy them more if I used water to kind of diffuse some of the color. I think that's how you're supposed to use them because they're wax pastels, and I think it said water activated, which I didn't know what that meant at the time, but now I think I've seen a few videos where people use them and their work turns out gorgeous, so I want to give those another try. But as far as just daily doodling and casual drawing, I quite like these more. And I decided that I wanted to color the bird in purple-ish and pink in the center, and so to have a little more contrast, I went in with a black. But looking back, I think I should have colored it in first and then emphasized its lines and things with the black on top, because the color does kind of mesh with the black. It kind of blends with it, which is nice because that means they have blendability, but for that stark contrast, I definitely should have waited to outline it. Okay, while I'm coloring the crow in, I finally found a good snack to eat while recording or streaming, and it's not too messy. I can eat it with my hands, and it's not too unhealthy because I could never do chips or like fried things because I'm chronically dehydrated, and fried things just they mess with my throat. So I got dark chocolate sea salt cashews, which is so good. It satisfies that like craving for something sweet and salty at the same time, which is super nice. I also got yogurt covered cranberries, which I wasn't sure if I was gonna like. I used to eat them when I was little, but cranberries were kind of like too tangy for my taste. Cranberries alone, at least. I don't know if tangy is the right word. Maybe like they're not sour and they're not really bitter, but it's somewhere in between there. But I think the yogurt is enough where it balances out well, and especially if I eat them between the cashews. And I've been snacking on them a little too much. I think they're like replacing meals, and I don't know. I'm just glad that I picked them up. I didn't like snacks like those small pretzels, like airplane pretzels, because they're too like dry and kind of flavorless to me, which I know is the point if you're going to be eating those pretzels, but just not for me, not my thing. But I also didn't want to eat like just straight up candy. So the fact that there's fruit and nuts encased in the sweet in this treat is like, I can justify it. I can justify it a little more. I've been trying to find healthier snack alternatives and just eat better in general because a few years ago I got my blood tested and it turns out my cholesterol was a little high, especially for someone my age. So my doctor and I were like, yeah, like, changing your diet is probably the most effective thing you can do right now, and the easiest. So I have been looking for low cholesterol snacks and foods and eating less fried things because I was a sucker for like crab rangoons and fries and veggie chips and chips in general. I know veggie chips aren't like the worst, but still. So finding things that were not only low in cholesterol, but like would help combat cholesterol, has been a side goal of mine this year. And I think one of the things was certain nuts, like I think it was almonds and cashews, I think, that were good for you. I've already forgotten. But whatever the case, some cashews, even if they're covered in like a little bit of dark chocolate, is better than eating chips and stuff like that. And look how much dust the coloring produced. Like, it was kind of satisfying, and I wanted to poke it and like smush it under my finger, but I know that would have blended it into my crow. And there's going to be a lighting change because my phone died while recording, so I had to sit there and wait like an hour or two or however long it was for my phone to charge. And the sun went down. But hopefully this is not too ugly. I need to figure out a better lighting situation in general. But I decided the crow it just kind of looked funky to me, so I wanted to thicken and darken its outline. And I know it's mid-July, or at least it was when I drew this, but once July 4th is over, it's spooky season for me, and it should be for you too. So, after drawing this crow, which I guess some people associate with Halloween and spooky stuff, but for me, crows are just everywhere all the time, so I don't really associate them with a specific holiday. But I was thinking spiders, even though they also technically aren't associated with Halloween because, again, spiders exist all the time. But I've already been thinking about how I want to decorate my room. Although some might argue my room constantly looks like it's decorated for Halloween, but I want to go a little more above average, my average this year. And I was just in a spooky mood. I wanted to draw a spider, and then I was like, okay, that was fun. That was like a quick little break from the crow, which took me a minute. And the spider was really easy to draw. And then I was like, let me draw another crow, but from a different perspective, in a different pose. And honestly, I don't know how accurate the wingspan looks, or any of it really, because I was just doing this completely off the top of my head, which I know I should use reference photos. That's why they exist. That's why stock photos exist. And my art always looks better, at least to me, it always looks better when I do use references. So I probably should get into that habit, but I was just like, I think I was watching a video while drawing this, and I just wanted to, freestyle, draw off the dome. And I didn't want to clutter my desktop with a bunch of tabs with different reference photos up because that gets overwhelming for my little brain. But anyways, I like how it turned out, and I think I liked the spider and this bottom crow drawing the most out of all the ones I did, because something about just using one color, or like one color with just a splash of color, like the hourglass on the Black Widow, something about that itches my brain. Or no, it scratches an itch in my brain. And I think I have like a newfound appreciation for two value drawings ever since I did that practice. And I already forgot the artist's name. I'll put it on the screen. But I watched someone else's video talk about how they did this guy's lessons, and they implemented this practice into their warm-ups, where what you do is you only use two values, black and white. And if your background is one of those colors, then really you just are using one value. And it forces you to really think about where you're placing your values. And you have to be very intentional with how you draw, because you only have one value to lay down a shape. So I quite enjoyed drawing these crows down at the bottom with just black, and then leaving the negative space to show highlights. Now, I don't know what I was thinking. Actually, that's a lie. I was thinking of using this red as the highlights on the wings and the back and the tail, but I didn't end up liking how it looked, and I think it's because I left some negative space on the head and the beak, meaning it had white highlights. So the highlights being white made the red highlights look like it was just a weird red part of the wing. And so I just ended up kind of coloring over it with the black later on. And since I'm drawing so many crows, let's talk about one of my favorite books ever, Six of Crows. I love that story and its sequel so much. I'm so sad that there's only 2 books. My friend gave it to me for, it was either my birthday or Christmas, I don't remember which, but they were like, this book is so you, or maybe, I don't know if they had read it at the time, but they said that it reminded them of me, the book, and so they thought I would enjoy it, and it did take me a couple of years to actually pick it up and read it because I was in college at the time, and the books that I was reading for leisure at the time was the Shadowhunters series. It was one of the latest installments. I think it's The Dark Artifices. But after I finally read Six of Crows, I was like blown out of the water with how good this young adult fantasy action adventure thriller, I don't know if it's thriller, whatever genre it counts as. I was really impressed by the attention to detail and the clever twists and conflicts in the story. I was like, this Lee lady is she kind of knows what she's doing. And I finished that book, I think, in days, which I hadn't done since middle school. Like, I know that doesn't sound very impressive, but for me nowadays, that's very impressive because I've slowed down with my reading. I am not that fast of a reader anymore, and I also like to annotate and take notes. But with that book, I barely wrote anything down because I just was consuming it as fast as I physically could read because I was so hooked. I needed to know what happened next. And once I finished the first book, I went out to my closest Barnes & Noble and I bought the second one. And I also finished that one in a couple of days. I think honestly, I probably finished the second one even faster. And of course, because I was hungry for any and all Six of Crows content, I discovered that there was a show. But it was a Shadow and Bones show, which, like I said, I had not and still have not read those books. So I was like, do I want to watch it and spoil those books for me? Because I do plan on reading them, and I just couldn't hold back, so I watched it. And I was confused. I was wondering how they were going to mash up these 2 very different and separate stories, because it was clear in the first episode that these things were happening simultaneously, and it wasn't like a flashback and flash forward, which that would have been confusing too and kind of wouldn't make sense. But I was pleasantly surprised at how well they did at mixing the crows into the Grisha story. I know they did the show focusing more on the Shadow and Bones side of the story because that's originally what they had the rights to the IP for, but I do think the show would have been better and done better if they had solely focused on one or the other. And from what I've seen online, it kind of is just unanimously, or I shouldn't say unanimously, but it's kind of agreed upon that the Six of Crows storyline is better and the characters are more intriguing and their arcs and their background and their story is just a little more compelling. I couldn't find the word for a moment. So being able to focus more on those characters, flesh them out more, and show more of their individual backgrounds and just give them more screen time, I think would have made for a better show, which is why I'm so devastated that they canceled the Six of Crows spin-off because I would have watched the shit out of that. And they had the perfect cast. I loved all of them. The actors were so good and just, they were so their characters. And I'm not saying the Grisha verse, or not the Grisha verse, the Shadow and Bone cast wasn't. I just haven't read those books, so I can't say. And they did a phenomenal job acting and everything. It's just that, like, we could have had something so good with the Six of Crows spinoff. So it's a bummer that we didn't get to have more time with the crows, both in the Shadow and Bone show and or the Six of Crows spinoff. But that's what fanfics and fan art are for. Although I personally don't read fics anymore because my to be read list is so many books long. I think I have like 8 books that are still untouched, and so I need to read those first. But best believe I'm like an Engi Six of Crows fan art I see. Anyways, I've just drawn some stars and bubbles here to fill in the blank space because I didn't know what else to draw there and I didn't feel like spending a whole lot of time drawing more crows. And I'm just going to fill in that empty space. But getting into the habit of filling blank spaces in with more doodles and different ideas is a goal of mine. I feel like a lot of my pieces aren't the most interesting to look at least in my opinion, because there isn't a lot going on. Like, there's one subject and then that's pretty much it. I might color in a background, I might doodle some stars and things around them because that's kind of my go-to when I can't think of anything, but I want to practice collaging, I think maybe is the word for it. Drawing different things all together on one sketchbook page and filling it in more so that there's just more to look at and I get more use out of the paper space. And I feel it's a good way to flex my creativity muscle. I will say though, there is something very therapeutic about just coloring a big space in. Very relaxing. And something I really like to do for my pieces is giving it an inset border. I didn't do it for this piece, but I also like to draw things that look like they're on top of the drawing. So like scribbles or doodles that you would see on homework or in a diary, little things that look like stickers on the drawing, words that look like those call-outs in comic panels. So maybe in my next crow drawing, I'll do that. But the closest we got here was the stars and bubbles. And the blood drip. Although that's kind of part of the drawing. So mostly just the stars and bubbles. I originally was going to leave the stars as just blank, empty, negative spaces, but I realized I drew them too small to begin with, and when I colored it in, it really shrunk their appearance, so I was like, let me just highlight them in black real quick, and I think that looked a lot better. It made them pop a lot from the background. The crow definitely looks like a crow I drew from memory, because it was. So next time I think I will do a crow study where I actually use a reference photo like I mentioned earlier. I think it's the beak that looks way too large for its face, and also the way the chest juts out too far, like forward past the head compared to the angle at which its body is. That I think is making it look kind of funky. And the eyes look a little off. So I definitely want to retry drawing a crow. And there we go. I went ahead and fixed it with hairspray because I don't have acrylic fixer. And this is a close-up. Ooh, so shiny. And I didn't know I had so much pastel on my thumb that I added my prints to the system, but there we are. Those are not coming off, even though it's on top of the hairspray. I guess it just melted in. And here's the whole spread. I think the spider was my favorite, funnily enough, but it's just so spindly and it looks like very Tim Burton-esque, and I think it just fits the vibe of Black Widow so well, you know? And that's it for me. Thanks for watching, and if you've made it this far, let me know which one of the doodles is your favorite. I let you know mine, so it's only fair. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye!